All right. Hello, hello. If you could go ahead and just drop your name and say hello as you enter, that would be great, and we will go ahead
All
and get
right.
started.
Hello,
Hello,
hello.
hello. If
If
you
you
could
could
go
go
ahead
ahead
and
and
just
just
drop
drop
your
your
name
name
and
and
say
say
hello
hello
as
as
you
you
enter, that would be great, and we will go ahead
All
and get
right.
started. Hello,
Hello,
hello.
hello.
If you could go ahead and just drop your name and say hello as you enter, that would be great, and we will go ahead and get started. Hello, hello. If you could go ahead and
Okay. Sorry about that error. All right. So, welcome to If It Wasn't for My Homegirls, the power and necessity of community when writing. My name is Autumn Griffin. I'm going to start off by telling you a little bit about myself. So, who am I? I like to start off by just talking about who I am as a whole person because I think when we do this work, it's really easy to lose sight of who we are. So, my name is Autumn. Like I said, I am a sister, I am a daughter, I'm a friend, a cousin. Um, I love the people in my life. They give me so much life and just are the reason I aspire to the things that I do. They are just wonderful. I'm also a second year doc student at the University of Maryland, just finished my second year. And so I am now starting comps, which is really exciting and nerve wracking all at the same time. Um, I am also a blogger and a podcaster for Black Academia, which I'll talk a little bit more about at the end of today's session. And my research, my area of research is on Black girls and literacy, as well as wellness and self-care. So just to give you a quick overview of where it is we're going today, I'm going to start off by talking about what a writing community is, why you might want to create a writing community for yourself as you begin this process. Um, we'll think a little bit about how you form a writing community, and then about also how you organize yourself as you read and write in grad school, because the volume can get pretty heavy pretty quickly. All right. So, what is a writing community? A writing community is a community of peers that reads and responds to each other's work to give support and feedback as you're going through this process, right? A writing community can be face to face. So it can be with other people in your classes, it can be digital or virtual. The interwebs are a great place to meet lots of different people. Twitter is a great place. For instance, that's where I met Alante, who does Black in grad school. Um, you can also have a writing community with people across disciplines, right? So maybe you have friends in other fields who are also doing master's or doctoral work. That doesn't mean they can't read your work, right? A lot of times, people reading our work from outside of the field is a great way for us to make sure we are not using too much jargon as we are reading and writing. I'm also going to talk a little bit about a writing group. You may hear me use the terms writing community and writing group interchangeably. But a writing group is part of your writing community. It's typically, although not always, some involves people from your cohort who share one or more classes with you, right? So these are people directly in your classes in the day to day with you who can really help you to kind of edit and think about your work in different ways. Why might you want a writing community? Well, first and foremost, grad school is hard. It's just a lot. There is a lot that comes with it. Um, we face things like sometimes we feel like we're not adequate enough to complete our program. Sometimes we get really critical feedback from professors. Sometimes we're just really far from home, right? A writing community can help to alleviate some of those stresses and help you form a community that can begin to build friendships and bonds where people are not only your writing community, right? But these people can very quickly become your friends and it can kind of feel like a kinship relationship. How might you form a writing community? Well, there are a few ways, right? The first thing that you want to do when you're thinking about forming a writing community is determine what you want out of a writing group or community. What kind of feedback are you looking for? Are you looking for someone to get critical with you and to give you really critical feedback about your work? Are you looking for someone to kind of nitpick your grammar because you know that maybe writing for a journal or a publication requires a certain type of English, and you want to make sure that you are using that type of grammar and mechanics? Are you looking for someone to support you as you develop your style as a writer? Are you looking for someone to support you with relevant literature and say, hey, I found this article that I thought you might really be interested in? Here it is. And you'll do the same. Or are you simply looking for some accountability? Someone to say, we said that this we were going to hand drafts to each other on this date. I'm going to send you this. Whether or not you look at it is fine. I just want to send it to you, get it off of my computer and onto your screen so that there's some other eyes on it. Any of these are relevant for writing communities. There are also multiple other reasons you can create a writing community. And you can kind of intermingle and mix and see which of these fits best for you, right? The second thing you'll want to do is look to your peers. You want to choose people you trust in whatever area you've determined is most important for you, right? So if you've chosen, I don't know, critical feedback is most important for you, you want someone who's really strong in just being a critical scholar, right? If you've chosen grammar or accountability, you want to make sure it's someone who's really great with a certain grammatical structure or who is really good with meeting certain deadlines. You want to make sure that the person you've chosen for your group is going to be able to support you in the way you'd hope to be supported. You also want to look to students in past cohorts, right? These students have often taken the classes that you're currently in before, and they can support you in ways that other people outside of your program may not be able to. So not only have they read the work that you're reading in class, they've also probably written the papers that you're writing. Of course, not with the same ideas, but they have struggled with some of the ideas that you're probably struggling through at this time. You will also want to look to people on Twitter and Facebook to try to figure out, where else you can find community. Some great hashtags to find community on Twitter are trying to grad from just trying to graduate, Black in grad school, which is the wonderful venue hosting our summit, and then Cite a Sister, right? It's great where sometimes you can just post a question and use one of these hashtags. Someone will get back to you with an answer to help you kind of think through your work and what you're writing about at the time. Black Academia, which is my blog, also has a book club where we read scholarly work and then discuss it in the Twitterverse, which also is a great way to generate some ideas, some scholarly ideas about different things. Um, for Facebook, your school likely has a Black Graduate Student Association. And if that is true, they likely have a Facebook page, right? Which means that you can go to this page as a resource to kind of build community and find other scholars who may not be doing the same work as you, but will more likely than not be at your school and therefore be able to help you navigate some of the things you're thinking through as you're writing. Your school's your school's Black Graduate Association is a great place to go. Facebook also has a group called Black Studies and Critical Thinking. So if you're a scholar thinking about anything related to Black studies, absolutely join that group. Drop your comments, questions, thoughts, concerns, relevant articles, all of that there. It's a great place to generate discussion and kind of begin to mold some of your ideas. I also want to say, don't forget about your friends. I think oftentimes when we go to graduate school, we are told that only one type of knowledge is valued. However, your friends and the people in the field before you ever got to grad school have a wealth of valuable knowledge, right? And the great thing is that a lot of their work isn't tied down by this jargon that we're using in graduate school. So, or the restrictions or the kind of restrictiveness of thinking, right? So they will have excellent insight to add to your paper or to your article or publication. Maybe it's not always sending them your paper. Maybe sometimes it's just saying, hey, I have this idea I want to talk through with you. And they'll be able to tell you what's really applicable and practical to the field as opposed to just reading theory all the time that kind of gets lost when we think about practicality of the work. Thirdly, you want to make sure you know both your partners and yourself. So you want to be upfront in sharing your strengths and weaknesses with the group. What are you self-conscious about as a writer? What things you know that you're gonna get dinged on that you're kind of a little nervous about? Be honest so that maybe someone can massage those things, right? Instead of just coming at you all crazy and hard. What are some things that trigger you when you write? For me, I really don't like when people flippantly dismiss critical scholarship. I am a critical scholar, so for you to not even acknowledge the work that I'm using is kind of difficult for me. It's a bit jarring, a bit unsettling. Um, so I always want to make sure that the people that I'm writing with at least have an understanding of what I'm doing, because if not, that is absolutely a trigger for me as a writer. So for those of you watching, what might be some like triggers for you as writers? What might be some areas you're self-conscious of as writers, or what might you like to grow in as you write? And I'm going to keep going and I'll pop back in for some answers. You also want to make sure you understand your partners as people, right? Do they have children? Are they people who work? Um, do they have a partner that they spend time with? What is their workload like outside of this academic world? You want to make sure you're being considerate of them, just as you would want them to be considerate of you as you're writing and working on something. And then lastly, how much time are you willing to devote to looking at someone else's work? Typically when you join a writing group or establish a writing community, people are going to be really thoughtful in giving you some responses that they think will be really helpful in pushing your work forward, right? You want to make sure you're giving the same level of conscientiousness to someone else. So really think about like how much time you're willing to carve out to look at other people's work as you do this. And lastly, you'll want to establish some norms. So if this is for a class, you should establish your group as soon as possible, as early on in the semester. You'll want to talk about some things with your group. So how often will you send work to each other? Is it once a week? Is it going to be twice before a class deadline? What is the case? What's the grace period for late work? So how long is it going to be before you say to a person, I actually no longer have time to read this because it was past the deadline that we established and agreed upon as a group? Is it 24 hours? Is it 48 hours? Is it 4 days? What's the case there? You want to determine the size of your writing group up front. So there are benefits and drawbacks to both larger and smaller groups. A larger group means that more people will be exposed to your work, which is great. You'll have more eyes on it. It also means that it's more reading involved for everyone, and that there are just a lot of voices coming at you when you're writing, which can be a little bit confusing sometimes. A smaller group might not have as many people looking at your paper, but they'll get to know both your writing style and your content, which for me is something that's really helpful. The more someone knows my content, the more they understand what it is I'm trying to say. Afterwards, because my groups tend to be pretty small, I might send it to someone outside to say, hey, I know you're not in this field. What are some things you're seeing, thinking? How can I be more clear? You want to agree on being critical friends. So a friend of mine just reminded me that her professor used to say, do you want to be a friendly critic or a critical friend? And by that, what he meant was that a friendly critic might give you raving reviews on a piece of work, which is nice to hear, right? For all of our esteem, especially as we go through grad school. However, a critical friend is someone who's going to say, sis, I know this might hurt, but this chunk of your paper right here really needs to be fleshed out. Or maybe you should take this part out. Or have you read this literature, right? And that person's feedback might require you rewriting pages and pages of your work, or rethinking some things, right? But at the end of the day, that critical friend's feedback is going to be much more helpful than someone who's just telling you what you want to hear to appease you in that moment. Also, don't take it personal as you are writing. I know that we spend a lot of time with this work and it's really close to our hearts. And so it can be really easy to get caught up in some of the weeds of what we're seeing when we're looking at feedback, and just become kind of downtrodden as we're getting feedback. Don't take it personal. Your writing group and your writing community that you've established has your best interest in mind, and they really just want to see you flourish as a writer. And lastly, hold yourselves accountable to deadlines. So if you've said that you are going to send your paper in on such and such a date by such and such a time, make sure you get it to your group, right? So again, they can be sure to have it to you. So they can be sure to read it and get the feedback to you in adequate time. A couple of final words on writing community. The first thing is that everyone plays a different role, right? Your writing community is not just made up of one person, and you don't want to overburden one single person. So there might be one person who's really good at looking over a final draft and just kind of like giving you quick hits before you hand it in, right? That's great. There's another person you might want to sit and process through ideas with. That person might require a bit more time because processing ideas is something that can be a bit more challenging and time consuming. There might be someone else who just is just really well read. And so you go to that person to say, hey, thinking about this thing, do you know where I can go for articles? Whatever the case may be, you don't want to put all of those responsibilities on one person because it can become really tiring. And more likely than not, that person is also a graduate student or also just has things going on in life at the same time. You'll also want to find the writing center on your campus, right? A lot of times, writing centers on campus will hold writing retreats, writing workshops. Sometimes they will send out surveys and then establish a writing group for you, which is also really helpful. So find that writing center, plug yourself in, get involved. They also have writing tutors, which is great when sometimes maybe your peers can't read it, or sometimes you just need like a different perspective, right? Go find a tutor at the writing center. They can definitely help. There's no shame. We're all growing as writers. It's cool. Share the wealth. So once you establish a writing community, if you find any publication opportunities or relevant literature that someone in your group would benefit from, make sure you forward that to that person as soon as possible. I get emails from most of my opportunities to publish have come from friends that we've just had conversations about my work and they're like, hey, I saw this, thought of you. And I'll do the same thing. Like, saw this work. I think you would do great if you were to publish here. And it's just remember, it's not a competition, right? So even though you and that person might be writing about the same thing, it doesn't matter. You all can have opportunities to publish together at a later point, right? So make sure that you're sharing that wealth across the community. Um, and then, like I said, sometimes writing community can lead to publications. One of my girlfriends and I wrote a piece on my blog called Partnerships for Professional Progression. We actually just got a piece published with multicultural education, and it is in press. And so we had a really great writing relationship. We happened to be friends first. And so we wanted to share some information about how to write with other people, with just like the larger community. I think it's really great when you are able to find people that are your friends that you can write with. It doesn't always work out that way, but in the event that it does, cherish that because it's hard to come by. Um, I wanted to kind of taper off with some quick tips for organizing yourself as you read and write. Um, I am not an organized person by nature. It like takes me a while to sit and situate myself and organize myself. And so I have to be really strategic as I'm thinking. So the three things I'm going to walk you through are setting manageable goals, getting a citation manager, and keeping track of your reading. I believe that all of these PowerPoints will be sent out after the presentations are over. And so I've linked here for you some different citation managers that I'll go through with you in just a second. So the first thing is to set manageable goals and to find an accountability partner or an accountability buddy. Like I said, I'm writing comps this summer, so I wanted to make sure that I was doing the things I needed to do in a timely manner so that I could meet my goal of having everything to my advisor by July 22nd. And so what that meant for me was going through and breaking everything down into some really strategic steps. So you'll see my first step here between May 17th and May 22nd was to create a list of literature. Decide who my second reader will be for comps, because that's also a strategic choice you have to make. And then draft an introduction to my paper using some other papers that I had written for class, right? You don't want to have to reinvent the wheel. And so you'll see I'm writing two papers at the same time. And for the second one, I'm just spending that first week curating a list of literature, right? So you can see that as each week goes on, the task gets a little bit heavier, a little bit no, I don't want to say burdensome, but just there's a little bit more meat to the task each week as I progress in writing. The second thing you'll want to do is get a citation manager. So I'll use Mendeley, and this is a screenshot from my own Mendeley desktop. You can see over here where I've got things organized both by semester and by class. And then down at the bottom, I have my comps. And underneath for my comps, the different literature, the different sections of literature are organized into sections. So this, what you're looking at, is all of the stuff on Black girls literacies. There's tons and tons more that I just have not moved over to that folder yet because, like I said, I'm just not organized by manager or by nature. Some of the other citation managers you might want to look into as you start your graduate school journey are EndNote, Zotero, and RefWorks. Um, Mendeley works for me. It was the first one I was introduced to, and I kind of just wanted to stick with it to make sure that I was being consistent in something. But one of the great things about it is that it allows you to cite straight from Mendeley to your paper. So if you're writing a paper, you can kind of just drop your citation in. That's really helpful. Again, this is something I wouldn't have found out about if I wasn't involved in a writing group, right? I had a homegirl who was kind of like, your stuff is all over the place. Let me give you an idea of how to better organize and manage all the citations. And I'm so thankful because now that I'm in a place where I'm writing and need to be able to quickly pull literature, I can go back and look at specific classes that I've taken and kind of just pull what I need as I need it. And then lastly, you'll want to keep track of your reading. So what you'll see here is a source list that I have as I'm writing. Anything that's in green is something that I've read and annotated already, and I'll show you a piece of my annotated bibliography in just a second. Anything in yellow is work that I may have read but maybe didn't annotate, right? So that might be something I read for class but didn't necessarily create space in my annotated bibliography for. You also want to keep track of your search terms as you're writing. So my search terms for this particular paper are listed here. That way, when it's time for me to write, I can share all of these things. This also just kind of creates a list for when I might be sharing with classmates or friends or colleagues who are asking me for literature in a particular topic. I can kind of copy and paste. Again, going to the back to that communal aspect of writing. So here you'll see an example of what my annotated bibliography looks like. And I do this for each article. And what this helps me to do is that when I'm writing, I can go back into my annotated bibliography and really copy and paste a lot of what it is I've written. At this point, a lot of my work for my paper is done. I've done a lot of the thinking down here in this reactions and critiques section already. And I can kind of copy, paste, doctor it up, make it sound a little bit more scholarly, and then put it right into my paper. So that is all I have for you today. But if you wanted to, follow up with me afterwards, I am on Twitter and Instagram. You can email me at readlacademia@gmail.com. There is my website as well. I also have a podcast that's available on Apple Podcasts, Android, and SoundCloud. Are there any questions before we kind of like head out for the night? Okay. Well, I wanted to thank you all for joining me. I'll stick around for just a little bit um, to answer any maybe lingering questions, talk to some folks about some things, and let me know if there's any other way I can be of service. Happy writing! Ria, no problem. Thank you for joining.